Oh, and I want to hear about that. I just want to get your thoughts on Trump, the Trump phenomenon, and what you can tell about the rest of the world by looking at their reaction to Trump.
Well, Trump is the equivalent of a Hollywood actor on the movie screen. And the anti-Trumps people are other actors in the movie. And so humanities, or those people that get caught in it, oh yeah, he's the baddie. He is. He's the baddie in this movie. That Trump, he's the baddie. Oh no, he's the goodie. He is the person I like. Right? It's a movie, and while we are focusing on this again, this minutiae of Trump, anti-Trump, left, right, and all this nonsense that we get caught into, Silicon Valley's doing what it is doing in terms of destroying freedom of information and driving on behalf of things like DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, this AI transhumanist agenda. It's a diversion. And you know, just a quick one, I talk about this hidden hand. These here today, gone tomorrow politicians are just that. Here today, gone tomorrow. What we need to look at is that which is always there, because that's where the power is. That's what pushes this agenda on, no matter who's in power, who's the president, what party, whatever. A quick example. In September 2000, an organization in America called the Project for the New American Century published a document calling for the American government to, quote, fight and decisively win multiple theater wars, to bring about a series of regime changes. And it named the countries that they wanted to regime change: Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, North Korea, China. The people who published that document included Donald Rumsfeld, who a few months later would be Secretary of State for Defense in the Bush administration, Paul Wolfowitz, who would be his deputy at the Pentagon, Dick Cheney, who would be de facto president under Bush for 2 terms, Dov Zakheim, who would control the entirety of the Pentagon budget in that same period. In that document in September 2000, they said that this process of transformation, all these regime changes, would necessarily be slow, this is the quote, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year to the month after that document was published, 9 months after the people that wrote it came to power in the Bush administration, the United States had, in September 2001, what Bush called at the time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century. As a result of that, this process of regime change was triggered by the so-called war on terror justified by 9/11, which the official story of 9/11 is tragically laughable when you break it down and you see how the contradictions. Anyway, this is where I'm going in terms of the politicians and Trump. First man in, of course, officially, George W. Bush. They went into Afghanistan. Then, with Tony Blair lying about weapons of mass destruction, they went into Iraq. And the reason they lied about weapons of mass destruction is because Iraq was on this list of regime change. They didn't have an excuse, so they made one up. And by the way, let us not forget, people now, including even the mainstream media, accept that they were lied to over weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which led to a catastrophic invasion and the catastrophe that has followed. Let us not forget that the very same people, not the same agencies, the same governments, the same personalities that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they knew they weren't were the same people that gave us the official story of 9/11. Okay, so the list, Iraq. Then they go into Libya, also on the list. But now Bush is gone, Blair's gone. Now it's Barack Obama. He's a Democrat, not a Republican. And it's David Cameron. He's a conservative, not the illusory of Labour, Blair. But now they're going into another one on the list, and then into Syria. And again, creating mayhem and catastrophe. I mean, you know, Libya is one of the great world's basket cases now, when it was the highest per capita income country in Africa before they sent the boys in. And so that was Obama and that was Cameron. Then we come to Trump. And Trump is now, yes, he's supposed to be a Republican, but he's the anti-establishment man. He's a maverick. A maverick who was going to drain the swamp and handed the American economy to Goldman Sachs from day one or before day one. But who is he demonizing now? He's demonizing Iran, and he's demonizing North Korea, other people on the list, other countries on the list. So this list from September 2000 has been ticked off all the way through these different politicians and different parties and different personalities. So no matter who's coming and going or who you're going to vote for, you know, it's like some Americans say, you know, it don't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in. Yes, the secret government. Because America's a wonderful example of how it works. So it works the same everywhere. During the Bush administration, and a Republican administration like now, you have this group that control the Republican Party that are acknowledged by the mainstream media. They're called neoconservatives or neocons. They were the people that created the Project for the New American Century, that wrote that document in September 2000. And then in the Democratic Party, you have another group, very much the same, that I call the democons. This is your George Soros's and Zbigniew Brzezinski before he died this year, and others. The key is that if you go one step back in the shadows, the neocons and the democons answer to the same master. So it means that whether it's one or the other, Republican or Democrat, that is always in power. And that's what's been driving this agenda of ticking these countries off as these people come in. Now, I'll give you an example, another example of how the manipulation works. For me, Trump was selected by these people. He was selected by these people for a number of reasons. One was because he would hand the government over to the corporation billionaires, which he's done, more billionaires in this administration than any other American administration. But also, he was, by his very nature, a polarity that you could play another polarity against, because they want divide and rule. They want civil war in America. They want civil war in Europe as well. But because while we're fighting each other, that can do what the hell it likes, unchallenged. But was one thing about Trump, which I think he was genuine on during the election campaign. He really didn't want conflict with Russia. He did want to come together. I think he was genuine on that. So if you look from the moment he got elected, although there were so many things of benefit to this hidden hand for Trump, there was one thing they didn't want, and that was Russia coming together. They want to hold them apart. They want to keep them in conflict. And so the moment he became elected, we had this Russia hacked the election. Russia this, Russia that, Russia the other. I burnt the toast. It's the Russians. And what it has done is prevent him from getting closer to Russia. Because if he tried to, they'd say, hey, controlled by the Russians, so he's got to stay away from it. And therefore, they're holding the two apart.
Is that what the election scandal's about? To make sure he doesn't get closer to the Russians? Yeah,
this is what it's all about.
So more hate, more anxiety, just keep that division going on.
Yeah, what we're talking about, Brian, as we've talked today, is going from perception of little me, which is what? A perception of apartness, a perception of everything being apart from everything else, to an understanding that we're all actually an expression of the same consciousness. And therefore you see it in politics and in world events, this desire to constantly drive apart. And this is what, in part, political correctness is about. It's about dividing different self-identities from each other and setting them at war with each other. And you know, this thing with Harvey Weinstein and all the stuff going on with allegations of abusing women in Washington and in Westminster. I said earlier that when they want an excuse to stop or to censor, they'll find an excuse that seems quite extreme. And people say, well, yeah, I can understand why they're doing that. But once they've got in, they'll then widen the interpretation until it encompasses people that are nothing to do with this. And so, of course, you have horrific and genuine abuse of women. Of course you do. You find it everywhere. Abuse of men as well. And that needs to be addressed. Of course it does. But if you notice, we've gone from sexual abuse and rape, horrific, but also now pulled into the same perception of abuse, are things that years ago would have been a bit of office banter, would have been a bit of a laugh, you know, having fun, making fun of each other. That's now there. And the effect of this has so frozen people, men particularly, that it was summed up by one British politician who said, I will never hug another woman again who's not my wife. I will shake their hand. And what is this doing? It's driving men and women apart. But you see, this is the classic way they do it. They'll take something that has to be addressed, that is absolutely wrong and can't be allowed to continue. But then they pull everything else into it, into the same conversation. And now, you know, people are, I mean, look at it. Look at the mental gymnastics that people go through before they speak now. They're speaking with a woman. Oh, okay, I'm not going to be spontaneous and just be me and let the energy flow. No, no. How can I put this? No, what mustn't I say? Oh, transgender. Do you know, there was an interview on my website today, which has a guy from Britain who was taken to court for saying to someone who looked like a man and was officially, legally a man, saying to him as he passed, because he'd seen him one or two times, all right, geezer, as they say in London, all right, mate, all right, geezer. He went to court and was convicted. He won on appeal, but he was convicted for basically hate speech, for not addressing this man who looked like a man and was legally a man, because this man had decided he was a woman. So suddenly, all right, geezer, is hate speech. What is this doing? All right, geezer, which is it's something you say. You know, it's a friendly gesture. All right, geezer, how you doing? Don't say that anymore. It's destroying human discourse. And it's all part of this agenda of destroying the free flow of information, because people will not more and more give their opinion on something because they fear the reaction of others and being called a racist or a bigot and all the rest of it. And of course, social media, run by these corporations like Facebook, it's basically an inquisition. It's the digital inquisition, whereby you say the slightest thing out of politically correct correctness, which changes by the hour, it seems to me, more things added on, and you get this Twitter storm. And people, and you have celebrities putting the sackcloth on and getting on their knees and asking to be forgiven for saying something completely innocuous. And so what I've done in the book, Everything You Need to Know But Never Been Told, is I've just gone for these things head on, not in an abusive way, but actually saying, I'll decide what I say and what I think. No, and you won't. I respect your right to have your opinion. Why don't you respect other people's right to have their opinion? And this is what's destroying discourse. And you know, as I mentioned to you before we started the chat, what I find incredibly sad and not a little pathetic is it's those that call themselves liberal, using the word these days come out of America, called progressives, who are driving this tyranny. Because the last thing they are is liberal. It's the inversion again. Everything's inverted. You know, if you look at the dictionary definition of liberal, which is someone who believes in maximum freedom of expression, maximum freedom of thought, maximum freedom of lifestyle, then basically you're describing me. That's what I've been like all my life. I have a simple philosophy. Do what you like so long as you don't impose it on anyone else. What you do, as long as you don't impose it on anyone else, it's none of my business. As long as everyone's happy with it, you know, all the best. Just don't impose it on anyone else. But that which calls itself progressive and talks about promoting diversity is an inversion of liberal. And it's an inversion of diversity. It talks about race, people being racist when it is obsessed with race. It's obsessed with race, it's obsessed with gender and the minutiae of it, like I said. So, hold on a minute. We're all one consciousness. What are you getting obsessed with race for? And gender and all this stuff, just an experience. But those that are obsessed with race, obsessed with gender, obsessed with destroying diversity by destroying other people's opinions that they don't agree with, promotes itself as liberal. It's a joke and it's an inversion, and it needs to be called out because it's very, very dangerous. When any tyranny seeks to get power, it targets information. It targets opinion that's different to the tyranny, and it targets opinion exposing the tyranny. This is why the Nazis burnt the books. This is why the Nazis broke up public meetings of those that were exposing the Nazis. What do we have today? We have people calling themselves anti-Nazi who seek to suppress other people's opinions, other sources of information, and ban public events of those that are exposing the fascism that's taking over this world, but a fascism, ironically, that calls itself anti-fascist. We're seeing a mirror of what happened in Nazi Germany, but it calls itself anti-Nazi. It's, like I said, it's a mind game. It's a perception game. And this is the point, really. The colleges and the universities in the West, particularly in America and Canada and Britain and some other countries, has been virtually now completely taken over by this progressive, anti-fascist, fascist mindset.
It's so anti-fascist that it's fascist.
Yeah, because see, labels are irrelevant. Outcomes change the world, not labels. Outcomes change the world. So what's the outcome of this progressive political correctness agenda? Destruction of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of free flow of information. That's the outcome. And that's a fascist outcome. That's a tyrannical outcome. I don't care what you call yourselves. I don't care what labels you give yourselves. I don't care how many times you call yourself liberal. What's the outcome? And the outcome is the same as what happened in Nazi Germany, basically, in all the major forms. And it needs to be called out because this mindset is leaving the colleges and is starting to people the institutions. the institutions that ultimately decide whether laws are going to be passed to ban this being said or that being said and the other being said. This is how now we reach a point where someone's saying, all right, geezer, ends up in court.